So arrays can be passed around as arguments. They can be parameters, obviously, to be passed to, and they can be returned from methods and so on. So what I want to do is just show you a few examples of that. You saw one already with the print array thing before. I have, and by the way, I just want everybody to look at this too. Somebody's asking where's your code go, basically. Well, most of what you do will be in the form that you create, right? So I renamed form1.cs to arrays demo. So everything's in this form that you type. I put something up here at the top as a class variable, a field, whatever you want to call it. We're not doing that yet. We will eventually, but not for now. Then the constructor. This is, again, remember, this is a class. Here's the constructor. Just leave it alone for now, too. It calls a thing for the form to initialize like all the controls and stuff. But you don't need to know about that right now. But these are two things you can pretty much not touch. But the rest are either methods that you create. So I have a method that prints out an array when I send it to it. Or typically you'll have, at least in the simpler ones in the beginning, you'll have some button you click. So whenever I click this button, do array demo, it goes to this method called btn do array stuff. It's automatically generated and we fill in the code. So most of the code that I do in this particular program, again, everything's in this class file. It helps to collapse this stuff sometimes. If you collapse everything and it doesn't look something like this, except for the form itself, keep it open, then you're probably doing something wrong. So you shouldn't have random code between these methods or something. So what does this one do? First, so this is where I get into this is the topic of this video, really. I created a new method for me called get random integer array. So let's just look at it. And I haven't got comments here. You should have comments, right? I should too, probably. But first, I'm making use of the random class. So I'll create a static random object that I can use in this whole. If I had other forms, I could use it as well. And actually, I couldn't because it's private. But every instance of this form will share the same one. We won't have to get into static. All you have to know is that this allows me to do random stuff. So pseudo-random, technically. All right, so forget about that for now. But so I have this method, and what it does is it takes a size. So how many things do I want in my array? That's the size. Then I declare a variable of integer type that's an array integer, right? So there's the brackets for this is an array of integers. I'm going to call that array random array. So again, remember it has a reference to an array in it. Which array does it have a reference to? Well, I'm going to create a new array right here, new integer array of this size that's passed as an argument. Remember, this is a parameter, and that parameter is a local variable that you can use inside of your method. I'm going to use that variable to initialize the size of this array. So in the beginning, it'll be an array of size amount of zeros, all zero integers, because remember, arrays have default values for their elements. Then in a loop, I iterate over that array. Notice I use random array dot length. I don't use size. I use dot length. Always, just to get in the habit, because it's a good habit for you to be in. Whenever you're working with an array or you're traversing it or something, use that length variable because you can always be sure that it's the correct thing. In this particular example, you know that size is the same as length, so it should be. Technically you could use size, but it's not a good habit to be in to use anything but the length variable when you're working with the limits. You're iterating over the limits of that array. So you're going, doing it one at a time, one element at a time, because you're starting at the 0 index and you're going up to the length index -1. And then what do? I assign to each thing, so 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then size -1. I'm assigning a random integer. So just to show you real quick, if you've got this, and we'll probably talk about random soon if we haven't already. I can't remember what we've covered sometimes, but it's a standard thing that you would use. If you type the dot, you can see what you got available to you. You could do different data types, but the default one, the one that's just next, is a random integer. Now, this is truly a random integer, which means I think it is actually always positive. Zero, or non-negative, I should say. But it's anything from 0 to 2 to the 31st minus 1. So what you'll notice when I run this is you get really big integers because there are more big integers than there are small ones. So more than likely you're going to get the big ones. Anyway, it fills up this array with random integers, and then what does it do? It returns the array. Notice, you don't have to do square brackets or anything. You just return the variable. What's the return value of this method? It's an integer array. So this is almost like, when you do new int size, it's almost like you're sort of doing something like that. You're returning an array that's already filled up to this thing. So just look at that syntax. If you return an array, it's going to be data type, square brackets, then the name of the method that you're returning from. All right. I don't know how to say it clearer than that. Like, I know it's confusing, but like, just study what this looks like. If you're returning an array, there'll be square brackets here and just the name here. You're just returning the variable. Really what you're returning is the address that's stored in the variable, because new int size creates a new object that's array type that holds integers. It'll have a memory address. That memory address is inside of here. You use the subscript operator to put random numbers into each one, as you go through the for loop, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And then when you're done, you return that memory address to where the thing that called it. So let's see how it's called. So in my button btn array stuff, do the array stuff, I don't create a new array, I create an array variable. This is where this is how I'm going to refer to this array inside of this method that it gets created. What does it get created by? This thing. This is almost like saying new int sum 10, for example, except what's different about this is instead of all zeros, it does random integers. So because this thing returns an integer array, so look down here. I think this is yellow, right, when it's finished recording. This will create a new array, and the memory address of the array that this method creates will be returned and assigned to my array. And then what do? I say print array, my array. Notice that this is an array argument. I just put the name in there. I don't need any square brackets or anything. When I call the method with an array argument, I just put the name of the array in. And what does that do? Look down here. Here's the method that how I'm printing. Now before I had 2 arrays parameters in here. I just have 1 now because I only want to print 1 array at a time. So I changed it from before. So the parameter, what does it look like? It's got the square brackets. So this is saying that I will receive an argument that is of data type int array. My array is an int array. See? So that my array will go down here and it will go into numbers. I could have named this anything. I could call it A, values, whatever. I could call it my array even. But it's going to get the same address as my array. And then what do? I just go through that array and print out everything. Something like that. Oh, I print it out. How do I print it out? I add it to the list box. So I haven't really harped on how to do this, but just notice it's always name of the list box dot items dot add, because you're adding an item to the list of items that you have in your list box. Okay, so let's run this and see. Okay, here's me running it. I put what I wanted it to do. Let me close this actually and start it again. Stop. So I set a debug point in because I want to also, while I'm doing this, it might help you understand the array stuff, but I also want to review because I want to make sure people aren't lost about how the code works. So I've set a breakpoint for when the button's clicked. It'll stop right here where it creates the array. So I'm going to hit F5 and run this in debug mode. Right, so right there's the breakpoint. And we haven't got to the breakpoint yet because it's not going to get to it until I click this button. So it's just kind of waiting for events to happen. Here's the event, do array demo. That makes it stop right here. So what does this do? Let's step into F11. Just put my finger on F11 so I can do this. At this point, I'm about to assign the return value of this method to my array. What it should return is an array of integers. So let's see what happens. Hit F11, which is step into, and you can follow where it goes. It's down to this cursor. I mean the curly brace, right? the first thing it does is it creates this variable, declares and creates this variable, and then it's about to call new int with the size of 10, which is what was passed to. If you go back and look, I've got 10 in my parentheses for get random integer array, right? So I'm saying I want an array of 10 integers that are random. That's what we're doing. So let's step into, see how that works. So what it does is it goes to a for loop. We're not going to review how for loops work. We're just going to see what happens at each iteration, because there's not that many. There's only 10, right? So let's just do it quickly. So currently I is 0. And then you see what, yeah, there's the random value that was returned was 4,847,000. I don't know what it is actually. I'm not gonna try to figure it out, but it's a big number. I'm not gonna stop and make sure I read. There's no commas to help me. So, but as you see, random number, and when I is 1, so the second thing in the random array gets, you know, random array sub 1, which is the second thing, gets this random value, and so on. Just watch this down here as I hit F11. You can see what's happening one step at a time. Random values are getting put into the array. So what's the upper bound of this array? What's the last index we should see get a random number? 9. Now that it's 10, that should make it exit out of the loop. And now that it's at this point, there's a way, I'm kind of rusty with my debugging. There we go. If you click this little thing here, it'll expand it. It shows you what the contents of that array are. The contents are. So indices 0 through 9, because it's an array size 10 array, right? And here's the values of each index. So if you go back through, maybe even rewind, you can see how it went through the loop as I hit F11, step into, it went through the loop one at a time, filling these in, right? So what I have right now is an array of 10 random integers that I'm going to return the address of to the calling method. So when I hit F11 again, it's going to leave that method and go back up to here where we left off, right? We left off because why? We have to finish get random integer array method call before we can continue on past this line. But at this point right now, we were about to assign the address of that array to my array. So they're kind of pointing to the same place. Of course, the variable that we had down there called random array is already gone, actually. The only thing that's left from that method executing is the memory address that was returned to this line right here, which my array will receive. Step into it for that, and if you look down here, you can probably like see some information about the array address and stuff. But in any case, let's expand this, by the way. This is the same object of memory that was created in this method. It's just the address was printed up here. So now if I hover over it and expand it, I can see the same numbers are in there, right? Now it's going to it's going to go down and print and add each one to the list box. So what's happening here is I hit F11. It's this for loop is iterating over this array, adding each element in the array to the list box. So if you notice down at the bottom, we were on 8. Now we're on 9, and that should be past the end of the loop, and this method will return. And then we step into, and I think it'll bring back the form. Yep, there it is. So now these numbers are in here. So this video was mainly about, it's kind of a review for how like the code flow works in Visual Studio, where you type your code, but it's also how do you pass arrays around. So make sure you study that syntax, look in the book. And if you have any questions, again, let me know in email.